do you think the government is doing a good job trying to combat this so-called epidemic, ? Or are we falling on our own sword? Some people are calling this a sort of conspiracy theory type of situation where we're doing all this stuff because of China trade wars or elections or the failing economy, etc., and there's no actual emergency. So what do you think? And obviously the media is selling, not entertainment, but selling hysteria to get people to watch and stuff.
Right.
Where's the balance there, and are we doing a good job, and what do you think about that?
Well, you know what? I'm just a pastor. I'm just a guy, and so when I'm looking at what politicians are doing, I look for self-interest, and so there are some politicians that want to make other politicians look bad, and so I know that many times what they do out of political interest, and so I'm not somebody that is naive about those things. And so when I look at some of the things that politicians are doing who don't like President Trump, for example, I think that many times it can just be nothing but political, and I think that there's that whole motivation in the situation. And so I take their pronouncements with a grain of salt. But on the other hand, if I'm looking at a politician who's going against the grain of his own self-interest, then I'm way more open to what they're doing. And I don't know everybody's heart, and I don't know and by that I don't know everything that would go along with their self-interest. But most of those things are pretty straightforward. And so there's some pronouncements that I've seen that I thought were selfless and made for the good of the country, and then other mandates that have been made so that politicians look like they're doing something. And that's all I'll say about that. Having said that, the Bible says that we're to obey every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. And that was written in the time of the Caesars. And I can tell you for sure that most of the Caesars, the proclamations they were making was for their own sake. And so, I keep that in mind too. So, are they doing a good job? The last I checked it out, our death rate was down at 1.7%, and it's just in a certain category, the older folks and that kind of thing, and that's down below many countries, and so that's a good thing. That's a good thing, and so I think that if I was a leader, I would want to keep the death rate as low as possible, and I would be responding in ways that would do that. And so I don't want to undermine any of those type of situations, but I think that we need to be sophisticated as far as knowing what the motivations are, and yet we're still citizens, and we need to obey every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. I hated the 55-mile-an-hour law with all my heart. Prayed against it, that kind of thing. And I don't mean to minimize this stuff, but there's a lot of things that politicians do that I think are just ridiculous. And then on the other hand, Jesus tells me to be a godly man. So I'm going to be a godly man, and I'm going to do my best to do what I think the Lord would have me do. So.
Okay.